Hello everyone, this is Roland. Welcome. I wanted to talk about doubts because doubt is the problem. You could almost call it the main problem. It's right up there with emotion. Doubt and emotion are the top problems that human beings have. And if you can learn to overcome doubt and emotion, then you will definitely be well on the way to salvation. Think back upon your life. Think back to problems that you had, and you'll see that almost always they're connected with emotions. Becoming angry, becoming upset, getting your feelings hurt, being jealous, feeling rejected, feeling unloved, being angry at someone, and so on. And so these emotions, these reactions, then transmogrify into other symptoms. Anger can become high blood pressure, or being angry and upset all the time can cause all kinds of stress-related responses. You know how that is. So these issues, excessive cortisol in the blood and blood pressure and heart problems and ulcers and tummy aches and gastrointestinal issues and many, 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 many others are well documented as being related to emotions. But today I want to talk about doubt. That's the other big one that we need to talk about because doubt is the bête noire of human existence. People doubt themselves and then they compensate. They doubt God and then they study and read the Bible as a compensation. They doubt themselves and then they try to build big muscles or look extra pretty or get people's approval. And this doubt is connected with temptation. It was in the Garden of Eden that Adam was tempted to doubt God. Now look, the serpent was there tempting away. That's his job. He is there to test us, I guess you could say. So he did his job. He very cleverly approached Eve. If he'd approached Adam directly and said, "Hey, why don't you eat that apple?" then Adam would have said, "Whoa, wait a minute, hold on now. God said not to do it." Would have been too obvious. So the serpent approached Eve. Then Eve approached Adam. And now Adam could simply have said, "No, Eve, God said we're not to eat of that fruit of that tree. So let's just put the apple down." Would have been very simple. But you know what? Adam had a weakness and it was found out. And what was that weakness? Well, it was a little bit of excitement at the idea. It was a weakness of having to do something of entertaining this thought. You see, he could have simply dismissed it. He could have dismissed it. And it's easy to dismiss various temptations, isn't it? You see other people struggling with things that you're not struggling with. You see them struggling with, eating too much or food or candy or excessive soft drinks or spending too much money or cocaine or alcohol or you see them struggling with something that doesn't happen to be your particular one. And it seems, odd to you that they're struggling because to you it's nothing. They can't resist a drink and to you it's nothing. You see what I mean? But you have your weaknesses too, and they are found out. And then, having found out, then whatever it is that has found it out, then continues to probe at that weak spot. You see what I mean? So, what is your weakness? One of them is doubt. You doubt. That's your weakness. You inherit it, but you have to learn to see it, learn how to deal with it, and overcome it. Because ultimately, the source of the doubts is evil itself. It puts forth the image or the idea or the notion. And when it gets inside, it can then also pressure from within, pressures. And then you have the double whammy of the doubt, the pressure. And if you attempt to deal with it on your own, attempt to struggle with it, then you will grow weary, and then you will give in to it. And then you resent yourself, hate yourself for having given in, and then it comes back again. So you must have precise knowledge about how to deal with such doubts that are the plague of the human existence. And just to show you how subtle it is, I'll just give you the classic example. I didn't make this up. I heard someone else say it, but it's so good that I'll use it. And then I want to read you something. The classic example is you lock the door, you get in the car, and you start driving somewhere, and then all of a sudden something says to you, you didn't lock the door. You didn't lock the door. And you're not sure, did I lock the door? And then you drive around the block and go back home and check the door. And the door is locked. And you get back on the car and start driving, and there it is again. It says you didn't lock the door. How many of you have had a feeling something like that? Well, now you know what that is, that spiritual dimension, that faceless, voiceless thing that whispers in your mind. It can whisper the actual words, or it can just be a notion, or it can be a pressure. And if you struggle with it, if you toy with it, you end up giving in to it. And then the whole cycle will start all over again. So you have to learn how to deal with it. Dismiss it. See it and dismiss it. That's all. The heck with it. Just go about your business. Because if you give in to it and start doubting yourself, but you see how subtle that is, but that same little doubt, that same little scenario I just described, you can give it a million different variations that it will use depending on your particular makeup, your particular personality, your particular background, and what suggestions you were subject to when you were a child, for example. People say, well, you're stupid, you're dumb, you're ugly, you're not as nice as your brother, you'll never succeed, you're not smart enough, you're not clever enough, you don't have an analytical mind, you're too scatterbrained, who knows all the things they say, but if one of them gets to you, then later in life, you are prone to that type of doubt in the mind, you see. And then you try to compensate, but there it is again, see. So I want to read you something. I'm reading from a book I co-authored with a good friend of mine named Michael Simon. Michael Simon was someone who had many, many issues, and he overcame them all. And he began to meditate many years ago. Now it's probably 30 years ago he began to meditate. And meditation was very, very helpful. And then he wanted to write this book about his story, about his problems and how he overcame them. And the title of the book is Mike's Story: How I Overcame Depression, Bipolar, OCD, Anxiety, and Other Issues. Mike's Story. So I want to read you something from chapter 12. Mike describes his obsessive-compulsive disorder symptoms and how he overcame them. Hi, my name is Mike. In an earlier chapter of my story, I related that when I was a kid, I suffered from obsessive-compulsive disorder. I said that I later basically outgrew the obsessive symptoms, and I mentioned this fact early in my story because I believe that many people have these types of issues. I wanted to give people some hope and encouragement. There is light at the end of the tunnel. I didn't go to therapy or anything. I didn't take any medication. I didn't really do anything other than experience the symptoms, and as time went by, they diminished. Here's a story from our life that serves as an analogy. One time when I was in college, I tried to lift my motorcycle over a car that had it blocked in a storage area. Not a good idea. I strained my back. It felt quite really bad for about a month. I couldn't even bend over. It gradually got better, though. Within 2 or 3 months, it was gone. That was 40 years ago. Well, the same thing with the symptoms of OCD that I had when I was a child. Most of them just diminished as I grew up. I sort of waited them out. The first one to go was having to straighten things and put them in a certain way. Another compulsion that went away was having to do some little ritual to take away something bad that might happen because I had a bad thought. There was also a ritual I had to do for no particular reason except I felt I had to do it. All these diminished and went away when I was a teen. But it has become apparent to me that other obsessive thoughts are far more subtle. They diminish in intensity and most have gone away, but some of them hung around into adulthood. Some were very vague and subtle, others were there only occasionally, but when they were there, they were very strong. I will mention a couple just to give you examples of what I mean. When I began meditating some 20 years ago, almost all the lingering obsessive thoughts quickly went away or diminished as a result of the meditation practice. A few hung around for a long time, and even today occasionally approach, but now I have learned to stand back and watch them, so they can't get away with anything. But I want to mention these thoughts anyway, even though they are a thing of the past, because I think it may be of help to some people to know they are not alone. I want them to know that others have similar or the same type of thoughts bothering them, and that someone has gotten beyond them successfully. So here goes. First, I will mention the ones that were only there occasionally, rarely. But when they were there, they were very strong. One of them struck when I heard a Bible verse that relates that Jesus said, "Ask anything in my name and it will be granted." Immediately, something wanted to compel me to ask for something very, very wrong. It was a pressure. And I think there must be some inner verbalizing because what it wanted me to ask for was said in words. I learned to separate from it and drum up some kind of resolve to quickly diminish it and not ruminate on it. I don't fight it or argue with it. Somehow I became aware of it and it diminished. Another one that only rose very rarely was when I heard the Bible verse that says that any sin will be forgiven except blasphemy against the Holy Spirit will not be forgiven. Suddenly an inner voice says a very bad swear word in a phrase having to do with this type of blasphemy. Again, I found an inner resolve to have nothing to do with it. It goes away. I can clearly see that it is not me that was thinking this thought, so I don't feel guilty about it anymore. I just separate from it and don't interact with it. The reason I know that it is not me that thinks such thoughts is the real me is ashamed of them. Now I will mention some of the more subtle ones that I never really knew were obsessions until I read a book written by a psychiatrist entitled The Boy Who Couldn't Stop Washing. In my case, these have been mostly various forms of doubt and self-doubt. These types of doubts are often something like going on vacation and then 200 miles from home, suddenly wondering if you might have left the stove on. The doubt is always accompanied by anxiety. In my case, it was like driving past a group of people and then wondering if I hit one of them with the car. Then came thinking about it with anxiety and feeling compelled to drive back and make sure I hadn't hit someone. Another example is going through an intersection with a red light camera and then worrying with tormented thinking and anxiety, wondering if I went through a red light. Many of these doubts are torments having to do with being accused of something or fearing and fretting over having done something wrong by mistake. It's interesting that these types of silly little doubts are a bigger form of pressure than the religious, blasphemous, or foul thoughts. The religious ones are so ominous that they are no longer credible. I see they are trying to scare me or make me think I've committed the unpardonable sin. Or they are trying to tempt me to tempt God. In other words, they are trying to tempt me to do or think something wrong to see if I will get in trouble. It's like a rotten little kid daring another one to do something wrong. Now I see what they are up to and just dismiss them. The answer is to just not play the game. But I think the ones that are more mundane are more painful and tormenting because they tempt our ego to get upset and try to deal with them. For example, it's like when you get a letter on Friday afternoon that says you didn't pay the utility bill, so it is going to be turned off with a big reconnection fee. You know you did pay the bill, so it's a mistake, but you have to wait all weekend until Monday morning to try to clear it up. The issue itself is not so bad, but the emotions of fear, anger, resentment, a sense of urgency, and even doubt, did my check bounce, etc., are what caused it to be strong. So now I have learned, and I'm continuing to learn, not to react emotionally to anything, a bill, a letter, a phone call, a dent on my car, or an obsessive thought, because emotions cause a feeling of pressure, and the emotions condition our body to feel the upset and want to run or do something to get it over with. There are also subtle but anxiety and torment producing doubts about not being able to accomplish something, even some simple tasks that anyone can do because bad luck or fate would not allow it. If I was playing some simple parlor game and lost 2 or 3 games in a row, something tried to make me think that fate or providence was against me, and if I lost, it seemed to prove that I was cursed with bad luck. This produced anxiety and led to needing to win the next game just to be relieved of losing. Losing seemed to confirm that I was cursed. Winning would temporarily relieve the anxiety, but of course it always came back. These doubts were different at different ages or stages of life, but always the object of the doubt seemed to be to torment with the notion that some sort of loss or failure proved that I was cursed or unlucky in some way. In order not to fail or lose, and to have to face the torment of having the curse proven, I often avoided the task or playing the game. But then, of course, the doubt continues to cause anxiety as I realize that I am afraid to find out. These types of doubts are also subtle varieties of doubting or not having faith in anything, even basic tangible things. There's always a fear that I won't be able to do some simple thing. Open the door, find my key, pound the nail without bending it, or handle something without damaging it. Somehow bending the nail meant I was cursed or more incompetent than anyone else. It would prove that some sort of forces were arrayed against me personally. These types of doubts tried to convince me that if I invited someone to my party, they wouldn't come. If I got a goldfish, it would die. If I got on an escalator, it would stop. If I went to a party, no one would have fun. If I went to work for a company, it would go out of business. As the psychiatrist who wrote the book I mentioned earlier said, and as the people she interviewed said, knowing that the notion is irrational and absurd does not help take away the anxiety. It is only recently, now that I meditate and can stand back and observe thought, that I'm becoming aware of just how much of my life had been dominated by these negative thoughts and accompanying anxiety and torment. It is embarrassing to see how many things I did to prove something wasn't so or prove I could do something. We are all prone to these teases and torments because we have big, faithless egos. We're always trying to prove or disprove something. Someone wrote a book called Is There Life After High School? The author found that many successful people like CEOs or even presidents rose to the top because they wanted to prove they could do it because they lost a high school election, for example. Some became a CEO to prove something, but even after becoming a CEO, there is a lingering doubt. Others of us do rituals or struggle to pound 2 nails in a row without bending one to take away the doubt, but it keeps coming back. The reason is, and I hope you are sitting down for this, because the source of the mental tease is spiritual. There is a malevolent spiritual intelligence that knows about our ego weakness, our propensity to doubt, as well as our latent pridefulness. And it seems to delight in teasing people to take advantage of our doubts. The answer is not to get involved. The answer is not to play the game. Don't fall for the ruse. Don't rise to the dare. Don't fall for the tease. After you perform the ritual or degrade yourself, it comes back again, and each time you are weaker for having given in. Whether the tease is mental or whether it comes from someone's gossip or slurs, stand back. Don't react. Observe. Never rise to a dare or challenge. The same intelligence that tempts you with doubts about whether you turned the stove off or suggests that you are unlucky unless you win some game is the same intelligence that teases and mocks your innocence if you haven't tried some drug or had premarital sex, or challenges you to give more money to prove you are a good person, or set goals to achieve success. It is never satisfied, and it will never leave you alone until you learn to observe it without reacting. Your number one line of defense against mental tease and torment and against all taunts from cruel people is, first of all, don't resent. Secondly, don't rise to a dare or challenge. 3, meditate for mental distance. Now that I am able to meditate and stand back from thoughts and can see that I am not really thinking these thoughts of my own volition, I'm able to see what has been there all along. I see that the fact that I had a big ego was very prideful made me prey to these types of doubts. I was being tempted to make everything into a game, having to win to take away the negative suggestion. But since not everything works out in life, any negative results seem to confirm the negative suggestion, and the resentment and anger reinforced it. So I have learned to be less prideful and not to go along with the perverse game. Now that I have read some really good books on OCD where people are really honest and forthcoming about their doubts, I'm also coming to see that doubts are universal. All people have some sort of inner doubts and torments plaguing them, and I also think that many have had these sorts of things that they don't talk about because no one would understand. Many people are so compensated and keep themselves so distracted, they are unaware of what is driving and motivating them. This is not an easy topic to write about, so I've asked Roland to talk about it a little. I do know that since I started meditating properly, most of the doubts are gone. Those that are still there are very much in the background and are not a problem. Though they may seek to assert themselves, I am held apart from them. I observe them in the distance, but have nothing to do with them. An analogy would be like living in a big city where certain parts of town have bad and scary people there. Occasionally you drive by the outskirts of some part of town. You see it from the distance where it cannot harm you. Similarly, it seems like doubts are always lurking with their type of thinking, but when they are observed, they are like naughty schoolboys who are up to no good. And when the principal arrives, they rush away. The more I meditate and come to the bright side, the more the dark side retreats. Here are my comments, which are in the book. I'm reading from Mike's story. Thanks, Mike. Wow, you described it so well. It makes my part easier. The classic example of a kind of tormented thinking is the archetypal and virtually universal among people is the checking compulsion brought on by doubt. You lock the door and leave home, but something says to you that you didn't lock the door, so you recheck it. You leave, and then there it is again with the doubt about having locked the door. If you leave home and are far away, it might say you left the water running or left the door open. It may not say it outright, but it casts doubt into your mind. And when you cohabit with this doubt or give in to it, then you feel anxiety, perhaps until you can check it out and make sure the water is turned off and the door locked. This is classic doubt. At some point, you just have to say the heck with it and let it go. Otherwise, it will drive you nuts. The reader may not even be consciously aware that he or she is subject to these subtle doubts and negative thoughts. This is because he or she has not learned to be objective, to stand back and observe thoughts without being involved in it, and observe thought without being involved in it. Many people have doubts and negative thoughts which they think are their very own thoughts, but the truth is that these thoughts are not your very own. Thoughts enter from below and from outside. It is not wrong or a sin to have such thoughts. It is only when we entertain them and respond to them that we get in trouble. We all think that we are responsible for everything that goes on in our head, but the truth is that the negative and doubt thoughts are from the not you, the quote-unquote not you. It came from other people and from the world. It has been there from the beginning in the Garden of Eden. And ever since it entered into the first man, Adam, it is the spirit that awaits us and claims us. It holds the whole human race under its sway, except for those who find the way to be set free from it. Once it takes up residence in you, it thinks through you. It thinks it is you and you think it is you, but it is not the real you. Nevertheless, it has been your guiding spirit, making you doubt and egging you on. It never wants you to know it is there. It conceals itself from you by posing as you or posing as your conscience. It speaks to you with words. It even uses holy words and scripture to mislead you. And when you react to it or believe it, it conditions you to obey it. Know now that it is not you, and that its thoughts are not your thoughts. If they were your thoughts, you could control them at will. All you need now is learn to meditate and stand back. Watch all the tricks it plays and do not respond. Do not believe it and do not disbelieve it. Just watch it. It has no power over you. It only has the power that you give it by responding to it. From now on, only respond to what you wordlessly know in your heart is right. Stand back and do not respond to the faceless voice of torment and doubt anymore. Learn to quickly reject the doubt thoughts. Also, you must understand that since it is not you that thinks the doubts or the bad, even vile, filthy, or blasphemous thoughts, you need not feel guilty for them. It is not a sin to have a bad thought, only to cohabit with it or attempt to use it. For example, if I go to the grocery store, I'm likely to see a naughty picture on the front of a magazine. It is not wrong to see the picture or have a lingering image in my mind. Only if I attempt to use the image for any ego comfort, for example, or if I resent it, will the image start to have any power to torment me. I need not feel guilty for having heard someone say a bad word. Nowadays you hear them all the time. Just let it in one ear and go out the other. It may linger in the mind for a little while. Just stand back and do not react to it and give it energy. It will go away. If the bad word keeps returning to mind, it is most likely because you reacted, in other words, resented, when you heard it. Just stand back, watch it, and don't resent it. It may linger for a little while, but then it will pass. If you've been able to track the three this far, it is probably because it is becoming obvious to you that the doubts and torments that keep coming back, or which seem custom-tailored to torment you for your particular vulnerabilities or inadequacies, are generally more than just a lingering image from a magazine cover or a word overheard on the street. It is possible that some of the negative things could be just programming and baggage from a negative childhood home environment where everyone damned and cursed you and predicted bad things for you. But chances are there are spiritual factors involved that you must be prepared to see. Perhaps you can now also see this faceless voice or these tormenting pressures are working on an ancient theme, doubt. Doubt has plagued the whole human race. Adam's sin was doubting God. He believed the serpent who used Eve to whisper to Adam. And when the first couple doubted and disobeyed God, they became subject to doubt, and the whole human race has been subject to doubt ever since. The French have very aptly described obsessive-compulsive disorder as la folie du doute, the doubt folly. The voice of doubt is the betrayer. His goal is to make you doubt yourself. It is pure folly to give in to these doubts or struggle with them. It is folly to try to argue with them or talk back to them. You must meditate for objectivity so you can stand back and watch them without reacting in any way. When you stand back and neither struggle with them nor give in to them, and when you observe them calmly from the neutral zone, then God's light will deal with them. The light shines on them, exposing them. The unseen spiritual forces behind these doubts cannot bear the light and will flee or else burn in the light. That is why evil wants you to struggle with it. It knows that your efforts block the light, and so you end up all alone struggling and sinking in your lonely battle. But when you stand back, a force of infinite and incalculable power is wheeled into play, and there is nothing for you to do other than watch and marvel. If you look carefully, you will see that other people who are subject to the spirit of doubt seek to make you doubt yourself too. Some realize what they are doing, many others do not. All they know is that if they can make you doubt yourself, they feel better. Just don't resent them. Were you ever to find yourself and begin to operate from faith, the tables would be turned on them, and they would have to doubt themselves. This is the way it should be. They who are seeking to engender doubt should have to doubt themselves and the wicked game they are playing. And for those few who deep down love the truth, you will be doing them a great favor. If they doubted their present wrong way and had a change of heart, they would be saved from their prison of doubt. Doubt is the name of the game. The powers that be, those who grow rich through lording it over others, need to keep you confused and doubting yourself. That way the game they are playing goes undetected, and they can continue to lord it over you with knowledge. Careful, don't resent them. It is mostly through resentment that the bad spirit gets into us. Should you resent them, you might even feel so guilty that you embrace them and end up doubting yourself again. Learn to stand back. See what they are up to, but don't hate them. Meditate and stand back from thought. See how thoughts try to seduce you. Bear in mind that rosy thoughts can be just as great a distraction as negative ones. Just keep meditating and watching. I've been reading from Mike's story, his chapter about his OCD. I hope you enjoyed this reading.